Welcome to Girl in the Gov, the podcast,
where our goal is to make politics more accessible and less intimidating.
The show features an interview with an expert in the political field, walking us through the many cues we have about politics, civics, government, and more.
By providing civic education in the places we are, on our phones, and in the language we speak. And yes, we know we say like a lot.
It's kind of the point, because politics needed a rebrand. Welcome back to Girl in the Gov, the podcast. Happy Wednesday. When we're recording this, it's the day Joe Biden finally announced his re-election bid, which I can't wait to get all your thoughts on everything. I feel like when we talked about it, I don't know, maybe a few weeks ago, we were like, how is he going to do it? Is he going to do it like at a concert? Is he going to throw a whole party? Like, no, just a little campaign video. And he also went and spoke at a supportive labor group later in the day and had a speech there. But that's the announcement. There it is.
It really, I feel like with these, there's so much hype. And like, when's it going to be? What's the vibe going to be? I think speaking with a labor group is the perfect move for him. That is the group that he needs to win back over. Like so much of that group has gone Republican in recent years. So I do think that's smart. I think what was weird to me was that I woke up at like 8:15 this morning and I had all the notifications of President Biden officially reannounces campaign, yada, yada, whatever. And they were all from like 6:30 in the morning. Like it was a really early release. They were trying to get the jump on the news cycle, but almost so early. I was like, so early that I was like, okay, on Punchbowl, if I'm looking at his schedule, I don't even think he's up yet. Like, yeah, it just was like kind of interesting to me because while I feel like a lot of people wake up and catch up on the news and are sort of like, okay, what do I need to know for the day? It was almost so early that you could easily have missed it. You know what I mean? And I think...
yeah, they probably just wanted it to be on like the early morning shows and have it just be the conversation the entire day. But yeah, that's bright and early for sure.
It's also weird given that they've been leading up, especially in the last week. They're like, he's announcing this on Tuesday. To then release it so early. Like I would have preferred to have seen like, I don't know, a official like live broadcast moment at like during, I don't know, the Today Show or something like that.
I kept like kind of looking around too, because obviously I'm way past you guys timeline wise. Yeah. So didn't see it for probably like 6 hours after. But yeah, I was also kind of like looking through the articles being like, where did he do it? Is there some more information on this announcement? And it was really just the video, campaign website. And then again, he has the speech. But did you watch the video?
I did watch the video. My thoughts were, and let me just asterisk this. I watched it this morning when I was first waking up pre-coffee. I definitely need to watch it again because we know I don't function pre-coffee. Like, God help me. But from that, in that brain space, I did think it was good. Initial reaction was like, wow, this is good. I think whoever they paid to do the actual video and the cinematography of it all did a great job.
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely good. Was it mind-blowing? No, but it was definitely well made, and it was also inspiring, had that level of inspiration that was necessary. I think there's so much more that this campaign needs to do to really lay out everything he's done. Yeah, it's just going to be interesting, especially the age thing. It's everyone's talking about it, so I'm just curious to see how they play everything.
Well, okay, I have two comments off of that. One, I almost feel like his campaign needs to be a not wow, like this is what a presidency should be. You're not supposed to be in love with your president like some, figure you put on a pedestal. Like this is supposed to feel like the every guy campaign. So I do actually think there is something to that. That doesn't mean not laying out all the things they've accomplished and things they need to do. But in terms of the vibe, we're all in it together. This is the norm. Or creating a norm. I think there's something to that.
Yeah.
To the age point, I do think, and I might have said this before, but God knows, am I the one that's like 80 something? I swear. But is the fact that, or a benefit to Biden if Trump ends up being the nominee, is because Trump is no youngster either.
Right.
the age argument is harder to play. Whereas like if you have someone like
Yeah.
a Ron DeSantis, well, okay, like the argument of like, well, Ronnie
That's going
boys.
to be big.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah,
just
for
interesting
sure.
sort of seeing that unfold.
It's officially starting. Ron DeSantis is supposed to announce end of May, so we'll see if that happens. But yeah, overall, it was just kind of official.
Yeah.
Check that off the list kind of thing. But yeah, there it is, folks. We made it. He tapped Julie Chavez Rodriguez, who is a senior White House advisor and granddaughter of the iconic labor leader Cesar Chavez, as his campaign manager. That was also like a big thing for a long time now, people speculating on who was going to be the campaign manager and who was going to lead the charge. So that's now official. And yeah, I'm curious to see too, like how this leadership changes things compared to last campaign and all of that. So we will see, folks. We will see.
Mm-hmm. A classic, like, we'll keep you updated, dare I say?
Yeah, this will be topic of conversation, I'm sure, in weeks to come for over a year.
That reminds me, though, speaking of the long game, like the extremes of the extremes on that. Okay, maybe that's being really dramatic. But yesterday, we were chatting about this a little bit. The fact that the lieutenant governor of California already put her hat in the ring for 2026 for the governor's race, like that is...
I've never seen anything like that.
I can imagine in my brain, like maybe what I might be doing in 2024. But imagine what I'm doing right now in 2026. That doesn't mean don't plan for the long game. I'm not hating on it. But I'm like, holy.
No, I mean, you plan and God laughs. It is wild to think that was announced for 2026. Like, I've never seen anything like that. I haven't done much like reading on it. If people are like, what the fuck? Why did she do that so early? Especially because she's lieutenant governor. She's very well known in the state. I don't think she needs to do like too much to, when it comes to actually campaign for that race, to stand out. Like, she is a very well known name in California. So I'm just really confused on the tactic there.
Yeah.
And I also was like, yeah, and then who knows what Gavin's going to do, but Gavin would for sure endorse her. I don't know if he's going to do that yet or what, but
I also just feel like
crazy.
There's so much that could happen between now and even 2024.
Yeah.
So like that alone, it might change someone's point of view of what they're going to do or how they perceive things or how they want to tackle issues or like what the best role for them is. It's just...
Oh yeah, like where the state goes. Because it's like you really should run for something because of something you want to get done, or like things can change so much, like you said, in the span of 3 years. Different issues can come to the forefront, so it's like, it's just interesting to announce it so early, and then it just, to me, just reads like, oh no, like this is my next career move versus I want to govern on these things because this is what the times are calling for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do know what you mean. I mean, I do think that like at the same time though, like it's good to see a woman of that stature be like, yeah, like, fuck it. Like that is what I want to do with my career. I do want to be governor of California. So like, in a sense, like I love it and I love that ownership of it. But I do think that's where like politics and career gets so like wonky, because you're like, at the end of the day, like someone is making long game political or career moves in politics, not just her, like just in general.
Yeah.
And then
I don't think it's bad to have aspirations in politics if you're an elected official, if you want, to see yourself in a certain seat one day. And you're also supposed to announce with like, these are my visions, these are my issues. And it's too early to even know what 2026 is going to call for. So it's just kind of weird. But
I agree with that.
No, I mean, we'll see on that one too. Jesus Christ, I hope we have to talk about that for at least 2 years.
No, but what it makes me think too is like that's an interesting setup for a Gavin 2028.
For sure. Well, he's making some type of move. Who knows what? Yeah, and then also all the California senator stuff too. I don't know what's gonna happen with that, but
so much California. Yeah. I was doing, and this, we'll get into it in a second, obviously, but I was doing our candidate watch for the newsletter, and I was like, I had California updates at the wazoo. I was like, I promise everyone this is not just a California newsletter. Like, we really cover all over the place. Like this is,
Yeah.
it was funny.
There's a lot going on.
There really
it's rare
is.
too that we even have things people are paying attention to because it's usually pretty obvious who's going to win what in the state. So especially, bigger gubernatorial or Senate races.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, even with the California Senate race, it's like, it's really just the primary that matters. And then after that, it's like smooth sailing for whoever gets it. So it's a whole different world out here for sure. But
yeah,
crazy stuff. Shall we?
We shall. Okay. So this week's episode has some familiar faces. We have our friends from Cap Action, specifically the 10 podcast. We have co-hosts Daniella and Colin on the show. And this is literally like, we have so many of these episodes where it's like we could have just chatted for hours, but seriously, this is really one of them because it was kind of partially like gossip sash, like political gossip sash, partially also talking about think tanks and understanding like the connection of media, partially talking about like Trump doing Trump things. There was just so much to get into. And oh my, do we talk about the Real Housewives? Did that make it into the cut? I mean,
I think we did. We did get to some pop culture, reality TV stuff, I think, at the end. So you'll have to listen through to get that tea.
Exactly. I was like, were we still recording? Hopefully we were still recording at that point. Regardless, this conversation is so fun. It's one to share with your friends, one to listen to, one honestly to kind of like use as a mock-up for how to have a conversation with your friends about politics. Like I think it's kind of like the political friends at the brunch table. We also went on the 10 podcast. So I'll link it in the show notes. Make sure to go listen to that episode as well. We talked about new media, girl in the gov, all the things. So you don't want to miss it. And if you have not made the 10th podcast a part of your regular rotation, you're missing out. You are missing out. So make sure to add that in and obviously continue listening. So without further ado, here's Daniella and Colin. Hi, guys. Welcome to Girl in the Gov, the podcast. We are so excited to have you. Fellow podcast host, one that we absolutely love. Very biased. Very, very biased, I know. But regardless, we are so happy to have you guys. And we need to know, for those that haven't tuned into the tent yet, what is the tent? How did it get started? How did you two make your way onto this pod? Give us the lay of the land. And Dee, we'll start with you.
Sure. So the tent actually started as a different podcast called Thinking Cap. Oh, maybe 4 years ago? What is time? Time is a flat circle. It was definitely pre-pandemic. And, we were just thinking around in our press shop. We're like, we're a think tank. We are heavily focused on communications. We should probably have a podcast. So my former colleague, Sally Tucker, did a lot of research into it. And then we worked on figuring out what the name was. And then we launched. And it was I wasn't the host then. We had our inaugural co-hosts back then were Michelle and Igor. And it really just took off from there. We rebranded, I want to say in 2019, beginning of 2020. Leading up to the election, we became the 10th podcast because we are a C4 podcast, which people were like, what does that mean? It means we can talk about politics. And we knew that everyone was going to be interested in hearing our thoughts on the election cycle. So that's why we became the 10th.
There it is.
That's amazing. Also, I love the thinking cap name as
I know.
well.
Same.
I know.
Can we have like a
R.I.P.
thinking cap section or segment or something come back into the mix, because that is fun.
It was
I know,
so
I love
clever.
That.
I wish I could take credit for it, but it wasn't my idea.
No,
I could say yes to
obsessed. Love it so much. Well, the tent is a part of Cap Action. Can you kind of explain what Cap Action is? What's its goal? Give us that rundown too.
Yeah, sure. So Cap Action is it's the action arm of the Center for American Progress. So our focus is around turning the issues of the day into opportunities for the American people to engage their elected officials, make their voices heard at the ballot box, to influence our nation's most pressing policy priorities. So everything from the cost of healthcare, the cost of housing, to defending abortion rights and our democracy that we know are just under unprecedented threat. So that is Cap Action. We have been, like Daniella said, We are heavily involved around politics and elections. So we did a lot of work last year around, the increasing influence of MAGA Republicans, which we know the Republican Party is just marching in lockstep in this more and more radical and extreme direction, it seems, by the day. And it's been our focus to really educate the public about, what the consequences of that are for all of us as individuals and our institutions and country as a whole.
Yeah, totally. I, for one, have been having a very weirdly Trump day.
Oh, explain.
Oh.
So, okay. So
Sounds
this morning,
dark.
I know it was a very when you feel like you're in a simulation, that's what my morning felt like. I was like, okay, it's nice enough out. It's not freezing. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to start my day. There's so much mayhem going on. I'm going to actually start my day, not on my phone, and go for a walk. And then literally several people drove by me wearing Trump hats, especially this one guy. He waves at me. And it's new. It was a new hat. And I was like, what in God's name? We are not just supporting, we are in merch. And then I take myself down another street. I make a turn. And then there's a car with a sticker on the back that not only has Trump 2024 on it, but it has CRT in a circle and crossed out. And I was like, first of all, are you kidding
That's
me?
a vibe. That's a vibe.
Yeah, I was like, well, that killed my walk. That really, the mental health moment that was supposed to be just really took me. I was like, I'm going to send myself to therapy right now. Thank you. Yeah. So nonetheless, there is a lot going on in the Trump MAGA world. It seems to be the thing that we really can't get rid of. It is like an infestation, for lack of better words. And I'm curious, with the work that you guys do, how it's impacted sort of the direction that CAP has gone and what the focuses have been and are right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's had a tremendous impact, to use one of his words. It's not his word. He uses it. He does not own any words. I think in 2016, when Trump won that election, it was a lot, right? It was a lot of people, especially at CAP, just were really upset and weren't sure what was going to happen here. And I was here at the beginning in 2005, beginning-ish, when George W. Bush was president. And so I had to remind people that CAP was born in a position of being in opposition, right? Yeah. So we knew how to fight back against bad policies. We knew how to push back on Republicans. We didn't think it was going to be like that. Nothing can prepare you for Trump.
Totally different eras.
Totally different, right? So it's like what we were doing in the Bush years, but on steroids.
Yeah.
But it really, I think it taught us how the importance of fighting and fighting for the American people and giving people a sense of hope when things seem so incredibly bleak in the beginning of 2017. And it sort of continued even in the beginning of 2021 before Biden got elected. We all remember January 6th, right? So Trump may not be in office, but as Colin said, MAGA Republicans exist. He has totally infected and taken over that party. So everything that we are doing now, it's fighting the remnants of Trump and what Trump has left of the Republican Party, right? And I think one thing that's important for at least me as I do this work is our politics have gotten really crass, more crass than I could ever remember in my decades of work. And it's important to remember that at the core of what we do are people who are trying to feed their kids, people who are trying to just live their lives. They don't care about what's going on over here. And I can't let myself be consumed by the crassness of what they are doing. Be laser focused on the policies and how we can help either stop them, change them, or push for ones that we know are going to benefit people.
Absolutely. No, it's so true. Go ahead.
I'd also just add to that. I mean, unfortunately, it seems like for Republican voters, unfortunately, the extremism seems to be a feature, not a bug, which is deeply alarming and, not something I think the Republican Party or any of the rest of us have figured out how to break that spell. But I'd also just add, as bad as the first Trump term was, and unfortunately how far-reaching his influence is in the party right now, the prospect of a potential second Trump term where he's not, better down, concerned about running for re-election, what bridges he's burning with people in the party, the revenge tour that he would be on, given everything that's happened over the course of the past several years, is just all the more terrifying of just how much more scary and how much more damage this guy could do if he were to get power again. You thought, the cabinet was full of, people like Ryan Zinke and, Tom Price and others, you thought they were bad. Buckle up, because
Secretary of State Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Right? Exactly.
That's a good point. I've never actually thought about that, but now I know what my nightmares are going to consist of moving forward. So thank you.
I'm sorry.
But it's so true. It's so true. Like, he definitely, if elected, will just go like full blitzkrieg and like just tear everything down, because that piece of kind of re-election and any type of, I guess, rules or norms that he kind of had to fall into in his first term are just going to be completely out the window. I have not thought about that, but thank you so much for...
But you know what? I am curious, though. We often talk about how we feel like DeSantis is way more dangerous than Trump because he really executes on the shitty things that Trump talks about, but sometimes kind of fails to actually, thankfully, execute on. And do you guys feel the same way? Like, DeSantis is sort of the more dangerous of the two? Do you worry about what if like he actually wins the nomination? Just thoughts on the DeSantis situation.
Yeah, I worry about DeSantis because I feel like people who aren't involved in politics as much as we are think he's not as bad as Trump. And so because they think he's not as bad, they think he's like a palatable version of him, right? Like we can take our DeSantis, that he'll win, and he'll win the nomination, and then it'll be really tough because the media has helped build this narrative of, oh, well, Ron DeSantis, he's conservative, but he's not crazy like Trump. Oh, yes, the hell he is. Like, if you look at what he's done in Florida, it's terrifying. Everything from education to abortion to guns, like on every level, he is as bad as Trump. And to your point, I think more dangerous because he has figured out how to legislate. Now, granted, he's got like a very cooperative legislature with him, so that helps. But he's figured out how to just ram through this stuff that is still not popular, but yet it is managing to sail through because he's got the votes.
Yeah, and I would even argue too that DeSantis like actual policy that he's pushed us through is way worse than anything Trump tried to do as president as well, as far as the kind of like the bigotry, even, the stuff around guns, everything. I think on that state level and what he's been able to get away with, like Trump's actual policies, I think don't even compare to in my personal perspective, as bad as what DeSantis is doing in Florida.
I also think that Trump's an egomaniac and he wants to be liked, right? And sometimes, you could play that to your advantage potentially to, kind of, throw some roadblocks up to some really radical extreme policies. Like Ron DeSantis does not care
Nope.
who you are, whether you're a business, whether you're a mayor, whether you're, a city council member, whatever. If you get in his way, he will come after you and seek vengeance. And I've literally been in meetings with elected officials in Florida who are like, I deeply oppose, this policy that he's pushing, but I can't say anything because I'm afraid of him withholding money that our city needs for X policy.
Evil and petty.
Terrifying. Yeah.
That is so
and then
true,
but then front facing, he puts on such like a kind of like composed, classic politician, outwardly, whereas Trump, again, it's kind of like so heinous outwardly and still heinous policy wise, but just like that's why DeSantis is so dangerous. Like he's just, the policy is dangerous, but he is able to kind of trick people on the comms PR front. Yeah. Well, first tangent in the books. We'll love to see it. But we want to get into a little bit our I Have a Stupid Question segment, and specifically that's centered around, what you guys do at CAP. And to kick it off, we want to really just explain to everyone, like, what is a policy institute? Is it different than a think tank? Is it the same thing? Can you kind of break that down for everyone?
Yeah, I think they're the same thing. I consider them to be basically the same thing. It's funny because my parents still don't quite understand exactly what it is that I do here, and I've worked here for a really long time. But a think tank is a place where really smart people are thinking up policy solutions that they think will better the American people. That is the correct and generous definition of a think tank. I think there are some think tanks that don't do that, that they are much more interested in just, lining the pockets of wealthy people, but that's a tangent for another segment. So what's unique about CAP is that when we were formed 20 years ago, this is our 20th year, right? So we're like relative babies when it comes
Happy
to
birthday.
Other think tanks.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
We were formed like not just with the brilliant policy minds, but with the idea that you have to invest in communications and outreach, because you can write all the great white papers that you want, but if they sit on a shelf gathering dust somewhere and nobody knows about them, like, who gives a shit? I hope I can curse. Sorry.
Oh my God, please. You are good company with that one here.
Okay, fantastic. So, and that's why I was drawn to working here, because I was a comms person, but I love the idea of like policy creation, like in the context of, political communications and advocacy, and understanding that policy is implemented by whom? Politicians. So it's important to like be very connected to all of that. And, I think that's why CAP is really good at what we do.
Yeah. And I'm super curious from like a technical perspective, in terms of the policies that you guys come up with and the solutions that, come to be, how are those communicated to representatives? Like, is that in the form of, here is the policy, like almost like a mock-up bill of like how would they execute on it? Or is it more like, here's the information, go make the bill yourself? Is it both? Like, what does that kind of look like?
It can take a variety of different forms. Oftentimes we'll send memos kind of summarizing, bodies of research and work that we've done, what kind of priorities we think, have to be a part of a solution, and turn the keys over to the experts on the Hill who are working on these policies, or sometimes we will work, with offices and helping, refine and craft policies so that way, they best serve, particularly like the most low income and moderate income Americans, to be able to, ensure that they're reaching people how they're intended to, that they are, actually growing the economy, giving people more economic security. So, it can kind of take a variety of different forms. One other thing that we do, in addition to like, obviously researching policy, putting forward new ideas, is also making sure that like, we're not the only ones who are singing from the songbook, right? Because they're not going to hear our voices alone. They're going to hear them a lot more if they're coupled with like our nation's leaders, joining the choir. And so, empowering folks by making sure they have like talking points on all the, on all the pressing issues, making sure that they're like, communicating what's happening on the ground in their communities or in Washington out through their digital channels, providing opportunities for them to come join us here at CAP by taking part in events or doing things like, press calls or events, outside the Capitol, right? So we try to do all of the above in our engagement with elected officials, both in Washington as well as at, the state and local level too. A lot of the work that's happening right now around things like defending abortion rights or protecting voting rights, in a divided Washington like we have in Congress right now, thankfully we're seeing a lot of, progressive accomplishments come out of places like Michigan, Minnesota, New Mexico, Maryland, so on and so forth, and in really looking to them to be kind of leading on some of the stuff that we're focused on every single day.
Yeah. I'm also curious too, how are think tanks and policy institutes typically funded? I think it's always important to kind of follow the money when looking at different policies that are proposed. So curious about that.
Yeah. So every, think tank is going to be different. So I could talk about how CAP is funded. I think the majority of our funding comes from private individuals, but a large, like right up next to that, is support from foundations, from charitable foundations like, the Ford Foundation, Annie Casey Foundation, groups that care about advancing equity and best outcomes for people. I would say those are the two main buckets. We get a very small percentage, like less than 3% from corporate entities, and they fund just like general operating support, like the stuff that keeps our lights on. They don't actually fund programming itself. And we started years ago making our donors public. It's on our website under our supporters. Some think tanks don't do that. They should. We should always know where the money is coming from, because there are a lot of groups that hide behind their 501c4 status, and they don't have to disclose their donors, but they're like heavily involved in doing some really shady shit.
Yeah, exactly. I was like thinking about that. There's probably so many orgs that could call themselves, think tank policy institute, but it's just like Chevron funded, and it's just them, kind of fronting as some type of think tank trying to push certain policies. But yeah, I love that you guys obviously disclose donors. I think that's so important across the board in politics, but interesting piece of that puzzle.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, have you guys ever had an issue where like someone's like, don't disclose my name, like keep me off the roster?
So on the individual side, we do allow some people to remain anonymous. And there are like stipulations about who can and who can't. Like no corporations are allowed to be anonymous. It's only for individuals. And there's like varying reasons why some people do that. Like I know there's one funder in particular, like it was a safety issue about where they were giving their money to, and the safety that they felt could possibly be at risk if people knew where they were giving their money, because that's the country we live in right now, right? So yeah, it's not a lot. I forget the exact percentage from the last year, but usually it's around the 10% area, which according to, is it charity? What's the thing that like rates all charities and giving?
Charity
like,
Watch.
Yeah, something like that. But we're well like under like what they consider to be too many anonymous people.
That is good to know. Well, the media is intermingled in this whole conversation. And some could say it could be to blame for how we got here. There's definitely some POV on that. But I am curious about how you guys connect with media, how you work with media to try and get some of the data that you guys are collecting, the research that you guys are collecting to them and get those stories covered. So many, whether it's an agency, an entity, et cetera, have different approaches to doing that. And I'm curious what CAPS is.
Yeah, ultimately, when we're engaging reporters around trying to break down some of these really complex policies, we want to do that a couple of different ways. One, we want to make sure that the information is digestible, like it's relatable to everyday people, it's relevant to what's happening in their lives. Two, we also want to make sure that like we're not just giving people a boatload of data and saying, you should write a story on this, but it's also, who are the real voices that are impacted by these policies? And, do we have a storyteller that can help, put a human face on this issue? Do we have, kind of other voices in coalition who may, work with particular constituencies that are most impacted by a given policy that we partner with, and trying to pitch them out, to, help feed media interest in actually getting them compelled to write. So there's a number of different ways that we do this, in addition to, also, looking, closely examining media and seeing like, where are the missing angles here, right? Like what voices are not being heard from, what narratives are, maybe too influenced by special interest, right? And we're not actually getting kind of an authentic perspective. And so, we'll consider all of those different factors and take all of those different strategies and tactics into account as we're doing our media relations work. And then finally, I just say, I think especially over the course of the past 8 years or so, I think a real challenge has been like the media has so much to focus on, right? Because there's just so much happening all at once. Things are really, kind of scatterbrained, opaque, seem really alarming to people. And so it's really trying to exercise some maturity and like restraint and really getting folks to focus on like the things that matter and not getting, completely thrown off course by, the crazy tweet that, Trump sent one day, right? And really focusing in on like, what are the things that we know are actually going to like persuade the American people and or most impact, their economic security.
Yeah.
And,
I'm
and
actually
fundamental rights.
so curious about your perspective on this because their last few days in terms of state politics have been insane. Like right now we have 3 representatives in Tennessee that are being expelled. We have Kansas that is literally, just passed or overrode a veto from the governor regarding trans rights and trans kids in sports. I mean, there are so many things like you kind of alluded to too, where it's like overwhelming. It's like, where do you even look first? What I've been noticing with like national media is that all they talk about is Trump's plane or Trump's this thing, Trump's that thing. And granted, we did talk about Trump earlier, so he's still relevant in a lot of different ways. But I feel like there's this constant situation with national media where they're just talking about what they feel like are these fiery points as opposed to the things that are genuinely affecting everyday people, which are these state happenings. And the resistance to covering any of these state happenings is kind of wild to me. Like it takes to the 11th hour for them to finally be like, you know what? We're going to cover this. This might be relevant. This might be important. Meanwhile, it's like actually impacting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lives, if not millions. And so I'm just curious like what your perspective is on that and maybe just sort of your pulse on why that happens and how maybe we try and change that.
That's the $1 million question, right? Like it's hard. And I think there are many reasons why media always chases the shiny object, and they're businesses, right? There's a bottom line, and they're trying to draw eyeballs either to a website, to if anyone still subscribes to an actual paper, or to what's happening on TV, right? They're trying to be number one in the ratings. And as long as following Trump's car from the airport to the courthouse like he's O.J. Simpson gathers eyeballs, they're going to keep doing it, right? Yeah. They're not learning the lessons of, what happens when you ignore the things that are bubbling up in the states until they like erupt on a national stage. But the things that you just mentioned, the fact that like the Tennessee case is wild to me, right? Like they were simply exercising their, I'm pretty sure, First Amendment right too, to protest, and they're going to kick them out. And there's like a case of something happening in Mississippi where the state is going to like impose a non-elected court over a jurisdiction that had already elected people, happen to be majority Black, and like no one's talking about that. And I tweeted into the void, I was like, this doesn't seem legal. I don't understand.
Yeah.
And so it can be really frustrating. And like I think what we can do here is constantly remind reporters of like what really is important. Like, yes, I understand we need to cover the Trump thing. It is historic. He is the first former president to ever be indicted. I get it. It doesn't warrant the type of coverage that has been happening and when there are all these other stories that are out there. So like we have to figure out and be creative about how we talk about the things that we care about and figure out different ways to break through. And that's where Colin's point about making sure that we're not just speaking alone, that we've got our allies with us, that we're showing that there's like support behind whatever we're talking about, that this is what the American people really care about. But it's just always going to be this to get the media to stop
Yeah.
fawning over Trump's every single word and move.
Yeah, well,
And
it's crazy. I feel like you can watch like CNN or MSNBC or Fox every day, and that can be your like civic engagement or like political, engagement of the day, and you're not getting civically engaged. Like you're tuning into political drama and you don't know anything about like the policies that you might like find helpful to be implemented in your life, or like any of the actual kind of like bare bones and the important stuff that goes behind government. And I think that's a big reason why too people are so disengaged. And if you aren't, fully bought into the drug that is political cable news, then it becomes also a turnoff to so many people, and it just ultimately ends up with everybody not really wanting anything to do with it. And it's just such a cycle of such a major problem. But Colin, sorry, I didn't know if you want to say anything.
no, I was just going to say, I mean, like the media thinks their coverage is amazing, but, they also don't want to talk about like good news too. We had the lowest employment rate that we've had in this country in 54 years was achieved under this president, and have had unemployment below 4% for over 14 months in a row. We've got a, domestic manufacturing boom happening all over the country because, producers are building electric vehicles, EV charging, working on, installing broadband all over the country. There's so much that's happening right now. It's hard to get the media, much less everyday Americans, to understand the moment in time that we're in, when a lot of them haven't really seen the kind of progress that we're actually making right now in so long, right? For a lot of Gen Zers, millennials, like me, right? Like my orientation with politics has been like, oh, like jobs have been being like shipped overseas, right, for decades. And now for the first time, we're like bringing some jobs home. We're like taking on special interests like big pharma, negotiating drug prices, like capping the cost of insulin. Like, what is this, right? There's pressure that needs to be brought to bear on the media to actually cover good news.
Yeah.
And take on just you make money by covering the drama, right? But also, there's also a figment of like needing to inspire people's imaginations again, and like getting them to believe in their government being able to like achieve some things.
That is so key. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's easy to feel, disaffected if your rights are being taken away, if what you're seeing on TV is, paralysis and drama around, like, even just consider like how some of the bills that we've done, like the infrastructure bill or like the president's clean energy, and prescription drug plans and stuff like that, like how they were covered. It was like, oh, can you get one person's vote? Not like this is the impact that's going to be brought to bear on people's lives, and people are about to have a lot more job opportunities that help them like make a good living, raise their families, like retire with dignity after a lifetime of hard work, as opposed to just what's the horse trading, who's the holdout, like, and what do they want in exchange? That kind of stuff just doesn't matter at the end of the day, like, the impact of some of these things. So
Yeah.
I'd also just add that.
I think connecting the dots can be so difficult, especially when like a bill, like what was Build Back Better and then, turned into its current iteration, when it includes also so much. When it becomes these huge packages, it becomes harder and harder to explain. I remember we were asked to go on a pod to explain some of the environmental features, and us trying to recap even just that, even though it's positive. It was like, how many hours do you have? I mean, we got to go line item by line item, which is a positive thing. But if we're struggling to be able to take that into one little blob and explain it out, it becomes challenging. And I think if it's not happening in your exact backyard, it's really hard to visualize. Like if you're not seeing that factory open in your hometown, if you're not seeing that infrastructure project get off the ground. And
Sorry, this
you know,
just
you,
reminded my conservative uncle posted yesterday.
oh
He
God, I'm
posted
scared.
this meme and it said like it was like a picture of Biden and he was like, build back better. And he was like, but nothing's built, nothing's back, and nothing's better. And I'm like,
Oh, well, that's not true. Bless your heart.
and I'm like, but it's literally feeds to that point too. It's like how honestly, especially given that I'm sure the media he consumes is on a certain side, it's like, how is he supposed to fully understand what's in that bill? But it's not getting fed, you know, in the media realm as well. But sorry, Sam.
Yeah,
I was like,
no,
that really was, I was like giggling. I was like, I have
that
to let this
is,
out.
oh my God. Honestly, thank God you have a conservative uncle though, because it keeps us entertained.
Yeah. It gives a lot of like great anecdotes to this podcast. There's always
Oh,
something.
It does. Because
Yeah.
like
I'm so sure.
my fam is very liberal. Thank God. Thank God. I really got lucky there. All of the, you
I
know,
have a
six
nice
people
mix.
yeah, you've got a real mix over there. But I think the communication element is so key. And I know you guys have been working on this so much in terms of newsletters and getting actually these fact sheets out there. And especially on the EV end of things. And I'm curious what that's been like, what that process has looked like, and what you think, too, people need to know, voters, constituents, et cetera, need to know about these new climate change related policies that are going to make a difference, even if it's not immediately this moment, it's in 2 months from now, it's in 6 months from now. Like, what does that, you know, look like, and what are the big takeaways?
Yeah, I'm gonna turn it over to Colin to talk about that. Just an anecdote that we love sharing here at CAP when you talk about people not knowing what the benefits are. So our colleague Julia was telling the story about how was it a hot water heater, and that her mom didn't she needs a new hot water heater, but she did not realize because of the bill that was just passed, like she can get a massive rebate on it, and she's like, "Yay!" But this is somebody who is a Democrats, like, progressive, and just didn't understand like that part of the bill. So like there's a lot of work to be done to make sure that people understand how almost anything that is in their life there's one thing that is positively impacted by the suite of bills that have just been passed. Colin.
Yeah, I love that story. Bless Julia's mom. She's like the perfect anecdote. I think our real intent in sending out these newsletters, right, is to take these, we haven't really as a country done much like investing in America for several decades since in doing like big industrial policy since World War II. So it's been a little while, right? And oftentimes I think these things can be covered right now as like, this award is going out for $75 million to this community, or like we're making, a $200 million investment to, clean up lead pipes, or, this bridge is coming. It's not focused on this $75 million is creating 183 jobs that are paying $88,000 a year. That's $35,000 more than the average worker is making in the county where these jobs are coming. That new bridge is going to cut, people's commutes by 20 minutes every day, letting them get home to their kids faster so they can get food on the table and get them to bed so they can have a few minutes to relax at night or catch their breath, right? And so our real focus in sending out these newsletters, right, is what kind of impact is this having on people's quality of life? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, yes, people want clean drinking water. They want fresh air. They don't want to live in polluted communities. They also want jobs, but they want to know that their lives are a little bit easier. They want to know just how these policies are like actually impacting their lives. And so I'll just use one kind of anecdote. You brought up like the EV stuff, Sam. I was working on this newsletter a few weeks ago, and I'm from a town called Plano in North Texas. And I was working on this newsletter, and I was looking into like several different vehicle charging infrastructure manufacturers, right? Because they got, this was a big part of the bipartisan infrastructure law was creating a national network of EV chargers, right? So if you're on the highway, you're in the community, whatever, you can charge up. So we're going to need those by the end of the decade. And it was incredible to me, just as I was looking up, what was happening in North Texas, like within a 40-mile span, span of space in North Texas, 3 huge manufacturers are creating like these massive plants to produce tens of thousands of these fast charging EV chargers that are paying, good wages, right? And this is just what's happening in like one community, right? And you kind of multiply that out, like what's happening like across the rest of the country, much less across the state of Texas. And like, it's absolutely incredible what's happening right now. And, I think one other thing that I just add is that, one thing that we try to do, in addition to looking at like the quality of life stuff, is also, when these announcements are made, it doesn't just have an impact on like the people who are going to work at, let's say the big chip manufacturer in Maricopa County, Arizona, right? Like, it's not just those thousands of workers who, are getting good jobs, right? It's also like we work with a storyteller. Our stories team works with a storyteller who owns a dry cleaning company in Maricopa County who just got the laundry services contract for the big plant out there. And they're adding over 600 jobs to their dry cleaning company because of these kind of investments. And so, there really is just a huge kind of trickle effect with all the stuff that's like all the, investments and whatnot that are being made that are going to grow our economy and like make people's lives better. That is being kind of completely underreported, but is just massively going to change the game for people. And then finally, I just say, it's also making sure that like when we've got these investments, we're also kind of retooling like the workforce development and education programs and whatnot, so that they're actually like preparing people for these jobs.
Yeah.
So like you've got like, colleges like UTD are like training people on like chip manufacturing or like electric vehicle, production processes and whatnot. So that way they're graduating and going to be ready for these jobs so that they can take advantage of all the investments that we're making. So there's just a lot, there's so much to unpack. And so we're really, really trying to like paint that picture for folks, right? And like inspire their imagination because, a lot of folks have never seen this before.
Yeah. I'm curious too, like outside of like external works, like you guys who are, doing the work to communicate all of this, like who do you think needs to do better, like as far as getting this all broken down into the American people? I mean, it's really true, like especially this infrastructure package is monumental, like, and it's going to have monumental impacts on people's lives. Who needs to do better at communicating that? Like, how do you guys think the White House is doing? Obviously, I don't really have any hope in cable news or like CNN or any main, news channels communicating it, but what are some of the solutions you think, like kind of internally at like the White House and, even the Democratic Party, what is their responsibility to make sure, that people actually understand what's going on with this?
I mean, they have a huge responsibility, right? Like this is what and you see it now, like the president and vice president are on the Investing in America tour, I think is what we're calling it.
It's Joe-chella.
2023.
Yes, Joe-chella, sorry. But yeah, they have a big responsibility to make sure that they're using their bully pulpit to the extent that they can garner coverage to go out into these states and localities to talk about these things. They may not be able to or even want to break through on a national media while Trump is doing whatever he's doing, but they're getting great coverage locally, right? And so how can we make sure that cabinet officials are also traveling and doing the same thing? And, look, members of Congress, God bless them. Some are just better at this than others, but they all need to get really good at talking about what they've been doing in DC and how it directly benefits the people. They know these people on the ground better than we do, better than people in the White House. These are their constituents. So I'm hoping that they're upping their game and using the tools at their own disposal to make sure that when investments come in, that not only are they doing like a press release or they're at the ribbon cutting or whatever, but they're holding a town hall or they're sending out mail or going door to door and explaining, hey, you're really excited that the school is getting refurbished after years. Well, it's because of this bill that I,
Yeah.
voted for, that the president put into
Do you
law.
think those like classic press conferences, though, or even this tour is effective in reaching the people that need to be reached? I'm just also, I don't know. I think about, who goes to town halls and who, pays attention to some of these local press conferences. It's the people who are probably already engaged, but there's so many kind of untapped people that also need to be communicated to. And I don't know the answer of like what the best way to get the word out is, but I'm just like, sometimes I question whether, the classic kind of like press conference rounds, tours are effective. But I don't know.
No, I think it has to be all of the above, because there's still a segment of people, usually tend to be older, who do go show up in town halls. And these are people who vote, right? Like they will vote in every single election. So you need to make sure that you're talking to them where they are. But as we always say in comms, you have to meet people where they are. So if you're also not engaging folks on social media and explaining these things in a way that makes sense for the platform that you are on, like nobody wants to hear your like 8-minute soliloquy on Instagram. But if you're being clever about how you're talking about this stuff and making sure that people understand, like I said, meeting them where they are, I think that's a crucial element. And we know some people are better at that than others, and I don't know what to do about that.
I think you make a great point, Maddie, that like, do these things get covered? They actually really do at the local level, right? Like if the governor of this state is doing an event with like this cabinet official or like this person from the White House around the implementation of these policies, like it actually is really getting covered on local media. And we know that's actually what a lot of people watch. They watch local broadcast at night, right? And I think the thing to be thinking through is like, how do you get that story covered like on day 2 after that visit, on day 3 after that visit, right? And
Or to the
is making sure that
like,
every
don't
time
watch
like
the local news too.
Right.
Totally different platforms,
circulating.
all of that.
Mhm.
But then it's also, it is getting like the elected officials to, like I was saying earlier, like we haven't made these kind of investments in a long time, right? And so I think there's just a lack of like muscle that's been worked up on how do you go and sell these things, right? Like what's my responsibility to do that, right? And so I think folks are candidly like learning that muscle right now, and hopefully that's gonna just get stronger and stronger. And I think we'll also get a little bit easier too, as their communities are more familiar with like, oh yeah, like that terminal is being expanded at my airport, right? Or like this company is coming to, to our city and it's gonna, create a whole bunch of new job opportunities. Like I think as that is just a little bit more socialized, like folks are going to be stronger ambassadors to go, make the case to voters too.
Yeah. And also like, shout out to congressional staffers, right? Because this is where you see a big difference. Like people who hire well and who have staffers who, know how to make compelling content on Instagram or TikTok, like those are ones who get it. And those are ones who are able to like, if you're doing like a groundbreaking at the new wing of an airport, like they're going to take that and make like a 10-second or 15-second really funny video out of it that might grab somebody's attention, right? Like it is like an all of the above thing. And I think to your point, Colin, like figuring out, like getting out of we did a press release, we did an event, we got coverage on local news, we're done. It's like, no, we have to like extend the story, because we have to keep talking about these successes, because people will move on. They'll move on to the next thing. And so it's important to keep reminding, like, no, remember, like there's good stuff happening. And it's me. I did it.
We need some influencer campaigns. I went to the infrastructure, or the Golden Gate Bridge got, one of the large bridge grants from the infrastructure package. And so, Pete Buttigieg was there, Nancy Pelosi, the mayor, and they did a whole press conference there that I went to. And it was just like press. And then, it circulated on the local news, and then that was it. But, there's so many, construction companies and such who are being contracted for now this big project. And it's like, how can we get all of that to continue to circulate? Because I think
you have a really good video of you making direct eye contact with Pete. So that might be why. And
I made a little TikTok about it. Okay. And I think if there's more of that, it can be just like evergreen content too for these reps to be able to use and then to recirculate with, their followings and their email lists or whatever it is. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of work to be done, and especially given how monumental, especially this infrastructure package specifically is,
And that's a really good point about like thinking outside of the box when it comes to influencers and surrogates to talk about this work. Yeah. After the IRA was passed, there was a celebration, IRA, yay! And so all the people who like toiled for months, and it seems like years on this bill, came together. And so I'm in the room and I turn around, I'm like, why is there a property brother here? I was like, why are both of them here? And it was explained. I mean, I love the property brothers, but it was explained. There's a lot of provisions in here about, building green, clean homes. And the two of them are really big into like sustainable, like, heat pumps, installing heat pumps in your house versus like whatever the hell is I have in my house. And so that's why they were there. And I'm like, well, I know I'm not the only one who watches HGTV all the time. So like, who else is out there who I would have never thought to like reach out to the property brothers, but like, who else is doing work that's related to the stuff that's in this bill that has like some sort of following that should be engaged in all this outreach work?
Absolutely.
Totally. Because even like with that, even if they don't post about it, it's like the word of mouth, like that directly affects their business. The next time they're on site and they're talking to some contractors there, they're going to chat about that. And then they're like, oh, wait, I have this solution because XYZ thing happened. So it's also having those people in the room to be able to regurgitate the information and like actually show the application. Because like, I'm trying to think of like, okay, like I know absolutely nothing about chips besides like what I read in a release. Like, your girl's not a STEM girl. I wish I were. It would be cool. But like, it just didn't get the math genes on my end. But
Same.
like, it just, sometimes it skips a generation. And I think it skipped like 10 of mine. But regardless, we made it. We're here. But like, I wouldn't be the right person to then talk to another STEM person about chips and like how they're being built and why they need to be built here. I can give an overview, but it's not going to resonate the same as to someone that literally majored in the sciences and understands how those things are built. Like, a few of my friends, all engineers. I'm the lone non-engineer pretty much. And they get it. They sell chips. They make chips. They engineer them. They're inventing this stuff. And for them, they can make convo about it all day. And they're the people that need to be in the room too.
But I think also the like the ripple effect, like you mentioned too, about, the laundromat, like, and what that brings as well. I mean, even kind of showing the way that one policy reaches way more people than what you think. I mean, like, even, student debt relief is like, realtors are for it because then that helps more people, be able to buy their first home. It's like, how can you show the way that the ripple effect continues to all these other issues that actually affect people's lives? Like, I don't have student debt, but like, to see then my parents are realtors and like, maybe that can help them with their real estate business. It's just like the way that you can see the way that these things all are interconnected is so important. I think a really big piece of that communications puzzle. But what an amazing conversation. So many tangents in the literal best way. Thank you guys so much for coming on. But before we wrap up, can you guys plug where people can find CAP, where people can find the pod, you guys, like anything you want to push out there, please do.
Sure. Well, you can find CAP at americanprogress.org. You can find us on Twitter at AmProg. Cap Action is AmericanProgressAction.org and at Cap Action on Twitter. And I think also it's the same for Instagram for both of them. And you can find the Tent Podcast at the Tent Pod, hosted by me and Colin. I am also on Twitter, although decidedly less so these days, but I still go on random ass tangents about reality shows. I'm at dgibber123.
Love it.
And I'm CM Seeberger on Twitter. So follow me
Love
there.
it.
Wait, which
Yeah.
reality shows are you ranting about on Twitter?
So I am big into Real Housewives of Atlanta, Potomac, Salt Lake City. Yes, very specific to those three.
Okay.
I'm apparently going to be watching Bravo's Summer House because a former colleague is starring in the Martha's Vineyard version.
I know.
Colin
I'm so excited about the new one.
Yes.
That's so exciting.
Preston, who we interviewed
Wait.
on the podcast.
No way.
Way.
Okay,
Learn
I'm just
something
like
new every
adjacently
day.
excited. Also, did you guys
Um,
see that there's going to be a wiener dog on that one? Because that got me beyond excited. I was like, immediately yes. Besides, I was just amped in general and love the vineyard. Also, Potomac, obsessed. So we're going to need to have a side conversation about that.
Oh,
So-
absolutely.
I am also obsessed with Salt Lake City, and my current thing for the day is our girl Jen Shaw is down in federal prison in Bryan, Texas, and apparently her manager, I saw today on Instagram that she is not letting prison keep her down and is basically launching The Real Housewives of Bryan from federal prison. And
wait, is that for real?
Mm-hmm.
so he says it's in the early phases, and Jen is taking time to teach some of her new crew how to read and write. However,
Which is commendable.
yes, the script apparently revolves around the real life of the housewives residing at the federal prison center in Bryan. So
Stop it right
Screaming.
now.
Yep.
Wait, that's crazy. I don't watch Salt Lake City, so I don't know all of that, but I do know about the whole Jen Shaw drums. But crazy stuff. We also need both of you to watch Vanderpump Rules just this one season. I haven't watched any other season.
Yeah,
I just
same.
watched the current one just for all the drama. And I think it's you're gonna want to get involved.
I picked it up halfway through after learning of all the drama. And it is wild. It had been a long time. I don't know if you saw Schwartz last night,
Yes.
but
I saw
it
some
was
clips.
crazy.
Y'all are going to
So-
make me have to start watching the show.
No, you actually
It's so
must.
good. It's so addicting. And honestly, like Maddie said, it's like this last season, you don't even need to have like watched any of the past. Like it's just
Yes.
like rock and go kind of thing.
Okay. All right.
My
That's
new-
good.
My new thing is I was always like a holdout on Miami, but
We-
my younger sister, after a really aggressive lobbying campaign, finally got me to start watching, and that was nuts. Lenny and what's her name?
Lisa,
That was crazy.
insane. And the the hot mic moment. I was about to call it a short mic. I don't know why.
Yes.
Wild. I can't. But
Yeah.
nonetheless.
Nonetheless, there it is. Well,
Joe
we'll have
Biden's America, bringing you the best reality TV drama that we have had in some time. So
Very true.
nobody's talking about
Facts.
that. Nobody's
Correct.
talking about
Exactly.
build
boost
reality TV back better, okay, baby?
and it's been better. Thank you guys so much for coming on. This was
Thank
so
you.
fun.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
y'all.